Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hello.
Hello.
It's the week before Easter.
It is. Happy Easter. I've been dying to say that. So we were just talking about drug testing. And my question is, I think I've had maybe 2 jobs in my whole life where I had to get drug tested.
Yeah, I just had my second ever.
Did you find that the people at that establishment have absolutely zero sense of humor?
I'm trying to think.
I mean, I understand it.
I will say that the last one I did was just the GM, and he did have a sense of humor. I didn't have to go to somebody different to do it like the first time I did it. The first time I did it was because I was going to be working for a construction, for an electrician. But I was doing, accounting things, not construction. But yes, there it was. I had to go to this big warehouse and there were all these people there and we had this whole in-person orientation and had to pee in cups and do that whole thing. Oh, this last one was it was this I put it in my mouth and I had to keep it in my mouth for 2 minutes while it absorbed my saliva.
Oh, that's new.
That was new. Yeah. And then it was like an instant test for specific things.
Because you know me, I will talk to literally anyone and everyone. They were just like stone-faced, don't crack a smile. And I come out going, I can't wash my hands. I have to wash my hands. Because you can't wash your hands in the room where you pee in the cup. You have to come out. They immediately lead you to a sink. But I was like, what the fuck? I can't wash my hands. And they just, no joke, no smile, no. And I was like, seriously? Here I am in my cardigan and my pearls. Do I
look like a druggie? Last thing, I was dressed in a lovely pantsuit, by the way, that I adore. I think I'm going to get it in red, which is the color I originally wanted it in, for writing things.
Ooh.
Writing events.
Yes.
And anyway, so I was very professionally dressed. I did have purple hair, but other than that, I had my makeup did. My hers did. And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, I know how this is going to turn out, but we have to do it anyway. And then he went out and he came back in with water and then he handed me like these mint strips and he was all, you'll see why you need these after. Because the soaky uppy thing with the absorptive material was, it had a taste.
Oh.
And you keep that in there for 2 minutes. And I was like, thank you so much for this. Yeah.
Thank you for the fresh breath.
That's right. Yeah. So that's it though. Like all the jobs I've had, only 2 of them required drug testing, which is good. Yes. I was nervous about this one because, honest, like I'm always like, CBD doesn't show up in that, and it's not a drug, right? But then I'm always like, maybe it will, and it doesn't tell them what it is, right? So they're just gonna be like, you were positive for drugs, and I'd be like, nuh-uh.
I'm always worried that I've eaten a poppy seed bagel ever in my entire life. And
Me too. Show up. I was like, did I have a poppy seed? Because I know with the big one I went to at the orientation, they were like, if you've had a poppy seed bagel or anything like that, tell us, because that could cause a false positive. And I was opioids. Like, have I though? But it's just like walking into a store and walking out without buying anything, and then you feel like they're going to think you're a criminal.
Yes. I always think that. Mm-hmm. I always think they're going to think I'm a criminal.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
They're looking at me funny because I walked out. I know it. I'm not going to look back at them. I'm not going to look suspicious. And then you probably do look suspicious because you think that they think you're a criminal.
Because you're sweating and you're looking all over. Got this pained look on your face. Yeah.
Right? No. But my big thing is, because that's been my go-to form of defense in some things, is to meet somebody's eyes. And make sure that they know that you're not hiding from them. That's always been I learned that in like elementary school. But so that's how I'll look over and smile and nod, meet their eyes, and walk out.
We have at the shop, we've had people who will come in. We don't have any right now, but we've had people who will come in and they'll be there. They won't buy anything, which is fine. That happens, but they'll come in and spend like an hour. And they like want to touch every piece of clothing in the store. And I'm like, okay, you've circled the size 22s 4 times. You fondled the silk shirt 4 times. Is it just a sensory thing? You're enjoying it? If you don't want to buy anything, come in and browse. That's fine. But
must you fondle it?
Do you have to fucking touch everything? Are you 4 years old?
Listen, I like to touch.
But Judge,
I don't do it that much.
I was going to say, I've been in stores and public places.
Yeah, I don't walk around fondling things.
No, you're much more. You're not going to touch clothing that you don't know who else has touched. Yeah, you might touch the wall.
It's true. And here's the thing, though. Once I touch I'll resist it for a really long time. Then I'll be like, I'm just going to go do it. And then I'll touch it one time. And that's all I needed. I just needed to confirm with my brain that it is exactly what my brain thought it was going to be. And then we're good and we can proceed.
This is why we're friends, because we're both weirdos.
Well, and normies are boring.
Yes, and I don't feel the need to touch everything, but if you or we have other friends who do this, say to me, oh my God, touch this. I'm like, okay, let's go. I've got to touch that. Then I will make that happen.
Listen, touch this is usually better than smell this.
Oh my God.
If somebody tells you to smell something, that you have to have that moment of, why?
My God.
Tell me why first.
Oh, yeah. In our house, if it came out of the fridge, we called Nikki because she has the super nose.
Uh-huh.
She's a super smeller. But my sister-in-law, Amy, it was like if you were shopping with her and she said, smell this, and had a candle in her hand, don't breathe. Just give up breathing altogether because it is going to be the stankiest candle ever created.
Yeah.
But it's not that she didn't smell it herself, because she did. She'd smell it, make a face, and go, ew, smell this. No, it's going to smell bad. It's like they made us a candle called Wet Dog. I mean, right?
Gross.
That isn't, or dog breath.
Gross.
Equally delectable.
I don't like it.
No.
I bet somebody does that. You can probably get like joke candles that are like that. Just like, I mean, because they make jelly beans that are gross.
That are snot
flavored. Right? They're like
or...
snot earwax.
Yeah. Wow.
Randomly turkey dinner. Okay. Grass, I think, is a flavor in that.
Do you remember was it last year or was it 2 years ago? You know how you get that in the fall, you get that autumn party mix. It's the mallow pumpkins and the brown candy corn and all that stuff. They made candy corn and the different colors coordinated to flavors of a turkey dinner. So there was a turkey and gravy one.
I think I remember seeing somebody got that.
Yes, my niece did and gave me some. And I was like, why do you hate me? We sat there and tried them and it was like, a couple of them were okay, but let me tell you, if you ever see a green bean candy corn, fucking run the other way.
I have a writing acquaintance online who does what she calls snack-em runs. And she goes to get all the weird snacks that have come out somewhere. And she got a bag of those.
They're nasty.
I don't want to try. Because I tried those bad jelly beans one time and I was like, I never have to do anything like this again.
I don't want...
yes, this does taste like dirt.
I do not want turkey dinner cream soda either.
There's weird chips out there too. I know there's Canadian chips that people try and get all the time that they love. I have heard of ketchup chips. I would probably try them.
Yeah.
First though, I had a knee-jerk, and then I was like, well, I
have dill pickle chips
on potatoes.
Dill pickle chips are very good.
See where I would knee-jerk, but yeah, there's weird.
And Trader Joe's, what did they have? They had the turkey. It tasted like turkey and stuffing. Potato chips. And those, I think I got a bag of those. Those were okay.
See, I just don't eat chips enough to waste a chip thing. That was one of those things I cut off ages ago when I started trying to lose weight the first time, you know? So I don't. I get Fritos because they have 3 ingredients and I like that.
I went for decades without eating potato chips. And now I'm like, you know what? If I want a fucking potato chip, I'm going to have some. Though my all-time favorite is salt and vinegar.
Yes, where I will eat 3 of those and then I'm good.
Yep. I get that. I will just stick my head in the bag. You're more of a Dorito person though, aren't you?
Fritos. Jeffrey's a Dorito person. I used to be a Cool Ranch Dorito person in my 20s before I gave him up. And then he always liked the nacho cheese Doritos.
Yep.
And then we will get bean dip with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I usually got defaulted to that.
Talk about dog breath.
Right?
Doritos and bean dip.
But if you're both doing it, it doesn't matter.
True. Yeah, it really doesn't make any difference.
Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try.
Shall I begin?
Go for it.
All right. Look at that, taking the initiative, not having to be reminded. This is my...
Wait.
What?
Go ahead.
So I haven't done a compilation episode in a while, so I was like, hey, Easter is going to be it. So my sources were the oxygen.com/crime news, 19 News in Cleveland, Ohio, legalreader.com, News Channel 8 in Tulsa, and visitnorway.com.
I will.
The first one I'm going to tell you about, I love this so much. It's not actually crime, but it's crime related. I don't know if you're aware of this. In Norway, it's tradition to read crime fiction at Easter time.
They have all sorts of good things.
They do.
There. Like, what's that holiday that's like Christmas
The night
Eve?
before,
they do books.
Yeah, it's either Christmas Eve or the day before.
Sweden, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, it's one of those.
I'm intrigued by the Nordic countries.
So, yes, the tradition goes back almost 100 years. It started in 1923 when these two Norwegian authors, Nordahl Grieg, I apologize, I'm probably butchering these.
Yeah, I can't even pretend to know how to...
And Nils Lai decided to write a best-selling crime novel. I'm like, why did I think of that? Let's write a best-selling crime novel, shall we?
Okay. I'm just going to decide to.
Yeah. So they write this novel and they get a publisher. They get a big advertising campaign. The Sunday before Easter, the title of the book gets front page above the fold placement in the Aftenposten newspaper. And the name of the book was Bergen Train Looted in the Night. Mm-hmm. So as you might guess... Because of the title, many people didn't realize that it was an advertisement and thought the train had actually been robbed. So it got huge amounts of media attention, and it was a huge success. The story involves two students who ski from cabin to cabin during Easter break, which is apparently a very accurate reflection of how Norwegians spend their lengthy Easter holidays. They get really enormous amounts of time off at Easter time. So at this time of year, Norwegians are devouring all things crime-related on TV, at the movies, and especially novels. We can only hope that some of them might be listening to podcasts. So that was the fun one. Then there's just all this weird shit. Now, there are some really heinous multiple murders that happened on Easter, but I decided not to go in that direction. Yeah. I might come back to them later.
Apparently the Easter Bunny stresses people right out.
Really? So in 2017 in Shawnee, Oklahoma, child is dropped off at school by his aunt. And he's got an Easter basket. Why the hell kid is bringing an Easter basket to school 2 days before Easter, I don't know. But as his teacher was counting his Easter eggs, I believe what she was doing was count for kids who brought them in. She's counting them. So, okay, Johnny has 6 and Susie has 7. So they all have the right number when they go home. Yeah, except Johnny had a joint. So she alerted the principal, who alerted the police, who executed an immediate search warrant that day on the home that the child came from. I'm like, has law enforcement ever moved that fast?
Where was it?
Shawnee, Oklahoma. So they found several marijuana plants growing, other drug paraphernalia. They found pipes, they found white residue, and a shotgun.
That is not what Easter grass is supposed to be.
You got there before I did. There were also 6 juveniles in the home when the warrant was served. So, in total, 10 adults were arrested on charges that ranged from possession of a controlled substance and possession of drug paraphernalia to child neglect. So all the children involved were released to social services. So that's how they got to spend their Easter. So apparently weird shit happens in Oklahoma, because my next one is sent there too. This is in 2021. The police pull over. It's a rental vehicle, and there's a mom and a dad and 6 children. I believe it was a minivan, because I was looking at the pictures of this one. I don't know if I'll share the pictures of this one because it's just the back of an open minivan. It's not very exciting. Anyway, the police, so it was a traffic violation. It wasn't any big deal. But the police grew suspicious because when they're asking them about their travel plans, the man is giving one answer and his wife is giving like completely different answers. So they're like, well, something's not adding up. So they ask if they can search the car, and the couple says yes. In the back of the car, beneath the children's Easter baskets, was 3 pounds of meth, some marijuana, and some ecstasy. Because apparently they thought it was 1981. I don't know. Wow. Makes you wonder about the Easter Bunny.
Listen, that could have been a real good Easter.
Could have been. Turns out the man had been paid $1,500 to transport the drugs. The wife was unaware of the business deal, and she and the children were released. The word used to describe the wife was distraught. And I imagine that's what the husband was when he was released and his wife got a hold of him.
She was like, bitch.
She's like, you are driving a rental car with 3 fucking pounds of meth.
And our children.
And our children shoved in beneath their Easter baskets. I mean, I was not able to find out if they're still married or not. I mean, that's a dumbass moment.
It really is.
So, and here's a really weird one. In 2021, a woman in Northeast Ohio advertised a nice time-saving service on Facebook. So for a price, she would come by your house the night before Easter and leave Easter eggs filled with toys and candy and a letter from the Easter Bunny. And the price depended on how many eggs you wanted. So you could get 25 or 50 or 100. And I got to tell you, I looked at the ads, the prices looked reasonable. I'm like, fuck, if somebody had offered that, I would have done that in a heartbeat. Anyway, Easter egg hunts got very complicated at our house because I felt like it needed to be a hunt. So you would get the first egg and it would have a clue in it. And that would take you to the second egg, which had some candy and a clue in it. You had to find the clues. And then I'm like, Joe was like, why are you torturing yourself?
Pretty much in my kids' lifetimes, there's almost always snow at Easter here.
Yes, we've had snow, and we've also, one day, we all got sunburnt during the Easter egg hunt.
In Oregon, it was just going to be rainy.
Yes. So, okay. So this woman offers this service, and she started doing it. I have it noted down here somewhere. In 2017, and she had positive reviews. So several families many families contacted her and ordered the egg delivery. And I think she said she would deliver, it was something weird. It was like she would deliver between 10 p.m. Saturday night and 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. Sunday morning. So like she was going to be out. And there was this whole thing about she would post the routes that she was going to be taking to deliver these eggs. So you know where it's going. You know what happened. Absolutely nothing. Easter morning arrives, no eggs. 3 of the moms got together. They could not possibly have taken on this whole group because there were hundreds of families in this Facebook group. But they got an Easter bunny costume. They got some candy. So they drove around and made sure that at least a few of the families got visits from the Easter bunny, which I think was really, really sweet. Yeah. A lot of people were complaining on social media, of course, because that's what it's there for. But some people also filed police reports.
For theft.
Yeah, because you had to pay in advance.
Yeah.
So, but even weirder to me, the Monday after Easter, the Parma School District revealed that the woman had reached out to one of their student organizations, offering the students service hours to assist with this egg delivery. Mm-hmm. So they apologized to parents and offered to help local police in any way possible. So her name was Victoria Malinsky, and she was arrested eventually on multiple charges of theft. She had indeed found some high school students, and she just put them shoved them in a hotel room with a random bunch of stuff and said, fill these eggs and deliver them, but no, like, here's how this works. Here's what to put in. Just threw it at them and left. And then she totally threw them under the bus. to the parents.
Of
course. She also tried to recruit a local Girl Scout troop to stuff the eggs for free. On February 1st of this year, so this would have been last year.
I was going to say, like, Easter candy has been out for 2 months at this point. And there's no reason she couldn't have been pre-stuffing as these came in.
Especially since she'd done it before.
Yeah.
So on February 1st of this year, a warrant was issued for her arrest because she didn't show up for a pretrial hearing. So she's in the wind. I did find one reference that she had started making restitution to some of her customers, some of her victims. I don't know which word you'd rather use. And here's something I found interesting. I don't even know how I found this. You know, sometimes you just Google someone's name.
Yeah.
So she received 2 PPP loans in March and April of last year, each for slightly over $4,000. She was a sole proprietor, and it was something like food service contracting. So I have to think it was for this friggin' Easter egg business. But I just think she got lazy. She didn't offer apologies, nothing. Just didn't. It didn't even look like. And then one woman, there is a picture of what she got, and it was like torn up comic books and like loose. Just someone had driven by her yard and chucked a bunch of like loose candy. And
wow.
Yeah. So she was not too happy either. So
yeah, there was some rampant abuse of the PPP loans.
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
That's all I can say.
Yep. Oh, and I saved what is arguably the best one for last. So when everything shut down in 2020, you know, we all remember that. Some of us reacted to it better than others.
Yeah.
Some of us lost our fucking minds.
Some of us were already introverts, but even we reached our limit.
Yep. So on April 6th of 2020, in Flagler County, Florida, Jessica Nageldinger's family, I'm hoping that's pronounced right. They found a plastic Easter egg in their mailbox. Well, Easter was less than a week away, so they didn't think that much of it. They just weren't sure where it came from. So they bring it in the house and they open it up. There were some loose goldfish crackers, a square of toilet paper, a Skittles drink mix, and a scroll of religious writings. So no. You don't know where this is. You think you know where this is going, but you do not, because the scroll has a drawing at the top of Jesus being tormented by Roman soldiers, and underneath that is a photo of 2 men and a woman having sex. I don't get the connection. I honestly don't. Needless to say, the family was shocked at the imagery. They were also puzzled by the single square of toilet paper, which they feared had been contaminated with the coronavirus. Because remember, this was 2020. This was when it was hitting. Nobody
thought
knew.
It was anthrax, basically.
Yes, they basically thought it was anthrax. Nageldinger recalled seeing an unfamiliar gray Honda cruising her neighborhood, and she saw that it was stopping in front of mailboxes. She didn't think much about it at the time, but when she saw the car again in her neighborhood, she called the police. Abriel, I don't know how to pronounce it, Sestoni, who was 43 years old, was stopped and later charged with 11 counts of distributing obscene material, not to mention driving with a suspended license and violating stay-at-home orders. The count, they really think, everything seems to indicate the count may have gone higher or should have been higher, but the officials believe that either not everyone came forward.
Well, yeah.
When they got
I think if I got it, I'd have been like, whatever.
And you would have thrown it away and not thought twice about it. Or they think that some people got them and just threw them away without opening them. Which I will never in my life have that much willpower. I gotta know what's in there. But yeah, so Sestoni readily admitted to delivering the eggs after she gave the arresting officers a homophobic rant. When they arrested her, she said gays were teaching in the church and rewriting the Bible. She also claimed she had visited 59 places of worship to confront religious leaders about how they were teaching the Bible. She said she was driven by a need to expose people to the truth about the clergy, and she also said that church employees should return their salaries in order to fund health care for the elderly.
All All right.
I wish people could see the looks on your face sometimes. Because it's just like, what the fuck? There's no, I mean, you can see weird thinking, but sometimes there's just like, wow, there is absolutely no connect between A and B.
Yeah.
So, since the churches wouldn't respond back to her, she took matters into her own hands. That's what she said. And by her own admission, she distributed roughly 200 to 400 of the loaded eggs on April 8th alone. And she was doing this for several days until she got caught.
Wow. See, now if she had paired up with that woman who didn't deliver the Easter eggs,
right?
They could have fulfilled everything. They could. That's
have.
determination.
I just don't understand I don't understand putting the pornographic pictures on the.
It was her showing that it had to be a man and a woman.
I don't know, because it said that one picture. I don't know if they were all the same picture or if they were all different pictures. It didn't say, but that one was of two men and a woman. So it did not specify either what they were doing.
Yeah, her rantings did not involve threesomes.
No.
Huh.
I.
Yep. Well, people are twisty.
So yeah, and I'm like, of course she was in Florida.
Of course. Florida woman. It's not just Florida man.
So what do you got?
I'm doing the disappearance of Brandon Swanson.
And I'm guessing it doesn't relate to Easter in any way.
Absolutely not.
All right.
Sources: Medium, Vanished in the Dark, Where's Brandon Swanson by Jen Baxter, FBI.gov, Minnesota's Unsolved Cases, Disappeared blog, an article in The Vault via Inforum by Tricia Terenskis, Where's Brandon Swanson, Some Facts and Theories by Sophia Medella on Vizaka, True Crime Files. Alrighty, here we go. It's set in May, not Maine. It's actually Minnesota. May 13th, 2008 was the last day of classes for Minnesota West Community and Technical College. The next day, 19-year-old student Brandon Swanson, who was studying wind energy technology, went out with friends to celebrate. They gathered at a mutual friend's place in Lind. Then he went to a different party in Canby. And just so people know, these are all like little rural towns. This is rural Minnesota. At about midnight, he left Canby intending to go home to Marshall, about 35 minutes away, or about a 45-minute drive in his case. I mapped it, by the way, because every article said something different. So I mapped it in the middle of the night so that I knew how long it would take. He actually, some of the articles said he opted to go by smaller back roads instead of the main highway, because like Highway 68 or something basically connects everything. And so that's why the longer drive, or it would have been a shorter drive at midnight.
Well, if he had imbibed.
He had imbibed. That was my theory, too, that he was like, I'm going to take some back ways so I have a lesser chance of running into people. Yes. It's farm community. Mm-hmm. So his chances of running into somebody at midnight probably pretty slim.
And that's not, even if you're not, and I'm not saying he was driving drunk. I've not.
No, and his friends maintained he wasn't.
You know, but even if you've had a beer and you don't want to run into,
you take back ways.
Everybody has a back way home.
Agreed. That was where none of the articles said that, but I was like, that's probably why. Okay, but about 1:15 a.m., and again, he left at about midnight, he ran off the road into a ditch. It was just a little off the road, but it was such that he couldn't free his car. He couldn't get traction, and he was in gravel. He called some of the friends he'd been out with, but was unable to reach anyone, and he tried for like 40 minutes, I guess. So his parents finally, when he couldn't reach his friends, his parents received a call at 1:54 a.m. And he said, I'm fine. I'm not hurt. The car is not hurt, but I can't get it out. And I've tried and I'm stuck. So all I need is somebody to help me get this car back on the road, and then I will finish driving home. So his parents, Brian and Annette, climbed into their car and headed out. He thought he was about 10 minutes from their house, where he described where he was. And that was midway between Lind and Marshall. But when they got there, they couldn't find him. So they called him, and they're on the phone, and they're looking for him and driving around talking to him. And he can't see them. They're like, well, look for our headlights. Do you see our headlights? And he's like, no. Do you see me? And they're no. And so they said, okay. And they started honking their horn and flashing their lights. And he's like, I can hear it through the phone, but I can't see or hear any of that off of the phone.
Huh.
And they're like, okay, well, you flash your lights then. So they kind of pulled over and turned off their lights and waited. They were basically surrounded by soy and corn fields.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very flat there, in case anybody's unaware of that. So they should have been able to see something in the pitch black without street lights. And they hear over the phone, they can hear the click, click as he's turning on his lights in his Chevy Lumina, but they don't see anything. So they're like, huh. And they're like, okay, are you sure you're where you think you are? You know? And he said, yes. So they're getting frustrated on both sides of the phone at this point because it's the middle of the night. They were in bed.
Right.
He wants to go home. At one point, he hangs up on his mom, and his mom calls back, and...
Oh, don't hang up on your mom.
No, actually, this sounds like she was totally calm, because I would be mad. But she called him back. She was like, I'm sorry, we're both frustrated. I know why we're frustrated. Let's figure this out. And he says, okay, this isn't working. I don't know where you guys are looking for me, but it's not where I am. And he says, I see some lights in the distance. I think it's Lind, the city. I'm going to walk there, and I'll meet you at such and such tavern. Because they were all familiar with it. Again, small town. And they're like, okay. So the dad, he drives the mom and drops her off. And then he heads back out so she can go to bed at least. And he heads out to Lynn to pick up Brandon because, you know, it's going to take more time for somebody to walk there anyway. And he calls Brandon, and they're on the phone while Brandon's walking. And so Brandon's kind of talking about what he says, okay, I'm taking a shortcut. Instead of walking along the highway, he goes down a gravel road and he cut through a field. So basically he's following that glow.
Okay.
Thinking he'll get there that way. And at one point he says, oh, I hear running water. I can't see it. It's pitch black out here, but I hear running water. At 3:10 a.m., Brandon cried out, oh shit. And the phone disconnected just like that. His dad said it sounded as if like there was the sound of a slip. Maybe a slip and a fall. So his dad tried calling him back, but it went to voicemail after a couple rings, and he kept trying, no answer. Brandon's dad, Brian, called home, and he and his wife started calling Brandon's friends. Brian continued driving along the road back and forth, trying to find any sign of his son or the car. He went to that tavern a couple times. He just, maybe he made his way there. Nothing. Brandon's friends joined the hunt. They're all driving down side roads. They're all looking everywhere they can possibly think of, and nothing. So at 6:30 a.m., still no sign of their son. They go ahead and they call the police. And they report him missing. But of course, he's an adult. They're like, a 19-year-old man can go out and do whatever he wants to do. And they're like, you don't understand. But this isn't we being overprotective. We were talking to him. Something happened. The phone disconnected. This is a different situation. He didn't just decide to stay out longer. He's out there somewhere. And several hours later, the police finally said, all right, weird circumstances. He's still not home. You still haven't found him. We'll get involved. They went around, kind of drove around the town of Lind looking for him, making sure he wasn't somewhere there. And Brandon's parents continued to drive out in the more rural areas. And then when they still hadn't found it, police were able to get a hold of Brandon's phone records. And to everyone's surprise, the phone records showed he'd been 25 miles from Lind, closer to a town called Taunton, another small town along the same highway. Taunton is only 13 miles from Canby, which is where he'd left from, along Highway 68, and would have taken him about 15 minutes to drive when he left there at midnight. He was 15 minutes away from where he went at midnight, and yet he'd called them at 1:15. So that was weird. So maybe he got lost when he was driving the back roads or something like that. The other odd thing about it is Taunton was northwest of Marshall, which was where he was heading home. Lind is south of Marshall. So it's like he passed.
That's bizarre.
So he was just really, really turned around. Again, he had been drinking earlier, but his friend said he was not inebriated. He wasn't acting out. He had had some beers at the one party, and then at the second party, he'd done a shot of whiskey and then hung out there longer. And then he'd gotten there at like 11 something, I guess.
Okay.
And his parents said he did not sound inebriated or like confused, other than obviously his location on the phone. Like he was totally normal on the phone. He wasn't like, oh no, I don't know. So when police searched around Taunton, they quickly located his car. Everything lined up with what he had said. It was hung up in such a way that two of the tires wouldn't have been able to get traction. And so everything he'd said was clearly what had happened. There were no signs of foul play, nothing like that. Due to the surrounding area being covered in gravel rather than dirt, there were no footprints to see which direction he'd headed in. And of course, it's daytime. They don't know what
with
glow.
the light.
Yes. This new information and the search intensified. Helicopters were brought in, as were bloodhounds. The dogs picked up a scent from the car. They followed it for 3 miles, past an abandoned farm and alongside the Yellow Medicine River. So, water that he heard. At a spot along the rivers, the dogs stopped, and then they kind of disjointedly went on from there and then lost the scent. So, then they found nothing else after that. The riverbanks downstream were searched by the sheriff for 30 days, but no body was found. Like, even after the police kind of officially stopped investigating, he kept walking when he could along these riverbanks. It was felt that his body would have had to turn up if he drowned. It's not like it was weighted down. It would have gotten stuck somewhere.
Right.
And yeah. So they were pretty sure he hadn't just fallen in the river and drowned. But they thought perhaps he crossed the river or he fell in and he got out there. And that's why the dogs kind of had a sort of a trail. But at some places, so at that point there was runoff swelling the river. But at some places it was 15 deep at its deepest and then only knee deep in other places. They're like, it's entirely possible he could have gotten across. Why in the middle of the night he would think, well, I must cross this river instead of finding a different way, perhaps. I don't know. But if you're wandering around and you're lost in the middle of farmlands, there's woods. In the pictures, you can see there's woods surrounding this river. So he was walking through forest, which is exactly how people get lost, right? And I think his dad had mentioned that he kind of lost sight of the city lights and was just kind of heading in that direction at one point. I imagine that's when he was in the woods. While police ceased their official searches within a week, other than the sheriff looking at the river, like I mentioned, his parents, friends, and other locals held several large-scale searches, one on May 24th and one on June 7th. They used ATVs, horses, their own feet, but it turned up absolutely nothing. Not an article of clothing, not his wallet, not his keys, not his body. After fall harvest, more searches were done, including with cadaver dogs. The dogs followed a trail for a short distance. They did hit on a scent. So, and for them, that's all they're trying to do. So, cadaver. But it petered out and they never found anything. And since that was along the river, they started searching like nearby farmland, thinking drainage to the river had brought the scent, but they still didn't find anything. Ultimately, over 500 volunteers and 34 dog handlers from 9 states searched a 122 square mile area and yielded absolutely nothing. The tip line got 90 calls, but none led anywhere. In 2010, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Investigation took over, searching along the Yellow Medicine River, but also moving along the Mud Creek tributary. But they also found nothing. There are many theories of what might have happened to Brandon, but nothing concrete. Again, authorities didn't feel he'd drowned because the body would have turned up. It was considered that he might have fallen in and been drawn down the river for a distance before being able to get himself out. But they considered this when searching for him, so they were searching out from the river as well. It was below 40 degrees that night because Minnesota, and hypothermia would have possibly set in on someone who was walking wet that night, but they would have found a body. Another point is that his phone was said to be on until May 16th when it shut off. People could call it and it would ring and then go to voicemail.
Right.
After May 16th, it went straight to voicemail. Again, there were so many articles that said so many different things. Some said that it did that for about 2 days afterwards and stopped. Either way, if the phone had gone into the water, that would have been instantaneous. There would have been no ringing. It would have gone straight to voicemail. It was postulated that he'd staged his disappearance, which of course is always going to come up with an adult, but nothing pointed to that at all. He didn't have depression. He was very happy. He was about to get his certificate in this thing he was interested in. He didn't have like some rocky relationship. There was nothing that would have pointed to that whatsoever. And the setup was too implausible. If you're going to disappear, you abandon your car and you walk away. You don't call your parents and talk to them on a phone for an hour.
Yeah.
And, you don't try and call your friends. It makes zero sense. Nobody's going to do that. That's stupid. The area was rural and very lightly populated. The town near where he disappeared, Taunton, had a population of 135 people. That's how rural this was.
That's tiny.
The next closest town had 175 people. He was surrounded by widely spread out farms. While it's entirely possible that a psycho could have just happened across him, because of course that was brought up, foul play, the chances are incredibly slim, especially where his phone had last been located, as he was no longer near a main road. He was wandering around farms. So, unless the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family lived there, probably nothing. And honestly, farmers are asleep at that time.
Yeah,
they're not awake at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. It was suggested that a car might have accidentally hit him, considering how dark it was. He had on blue jeans, a black hoodie that zipped up the front, and a white baseball cap when he was last seen, and those items were not in his car. So they would have been on him. So it stands to reason he had them on, and somebody could have hit him in the middle of the night. However, there would have been some evidence of this left behind, even if the person had removed his body to cover their crime. There would have been pieces of the car, for example, like a busted light or blood, and the dogs would have found the blood.
Right.
They would have tracked it right to the blood, not to the river. Another possibility was that he'd taken shelter in an outbuilding on a farm property, fallen into a hole, a cistern, or a well, but the body would have been found by now, they felt, and again, the dogs would have led him to where he disappeared. The area has black bears and wildcats, but an animal attack would have left behind evidence just as the car wreck would have. Mm-hmm. And the dogs would have found it.
Yeah.
All these years later, and no sign of him has yet been found. His keys, wallet, glasses, a chain, his phone, and clothing disappeared with him. Brandon was 19 in 2008, 5'6", 125 pounds. He was white with brown hair and blue eyes. His ears were pierced. On July 1st, 2009, driven by his parents, Brandon's law went into effect. It changes how investigations into missing adults are handled. Now, if the circumstances are considered dangerous, say at risk, right, they must immediately take a missing persons report, no matter their age, and they must conduct an immediate preliminary investigation to determine whether the person is missing and endangered. And we see, that's just in one state.
Right.
To be clear. Due to drought, new searches were completed in fall 2021 because the river had dried up so much that they were hoping that extra exposed earth would lead to something. The cadaver dogs have hit on areas near Porter, so an emergency group is still searching there when they can. Porter is about 6 miles from where his car broke down. And remember, the original scent tracking dogs made it about 3 miles before they lost his scent. Unfortunately, there are areas where private landowners have refuse to let anyone search and still refuse. And the cops they can't say probable cause for your property, so they can't search them, and that leaves holes in where the dogs have been able to go.
Why would you not? If you didn't have anything to hide, why would you not let them on?
So they said that the ones refusing are primarily cattle farmers, and they don't want the search dogs on their property. Other than that, I don't know. There have been concerns that their property would get messed up. But they said they've been very respectful because of the area. And that's why they stop searching for a while until the crops had been harvested. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the farmers were like, no, I don't want you and your dogs walking over my corn.
Right.
To follow a scent. But years and years later, that's not the problem. And again, it's mostly the cattle ranchers. So I said, in my opinion, they are primarily douches.
Yeah.
And that's why. Because somebody's missing their child. But some of them have also done the search on their own land since they didn't want to let anybody in there. But it's like, yeah, but you're not a dog. You can't find a body. At the same time, if it's all workable land, they would have found the body when they were working it.
Yeah.
I was like, did he die of exposure in somebody's property and they took care of the body because they didn't want to get in trouble? Like, I don't know. And so here's the problem now. The issue is that there are very few dogs trained to track what they call aging scent, like this one. Even a cadaver at this point, it's really not a cadaver anymore. It's bones.
Yeah.
And there's only 3 in the entire state that are qualified for aging scent. And of course, the longer it goes, the more the chances dwindle of finding a body on those properties they haven't been able to search. So, and just to throw it out there, because of things in the past, before anyone gets offended about the fact that the authorities are still looking for him all these years later, that boils down to the fact it's an excessively rural area with a very minimal population. The sheriff's office doesn't have that much to do. It's not a high crime area. They can afford to kind of, you know what, we're not doing anything. Let's go out and continue searching, let's continue looking. So they're better equipped to look into cold cases, and the Bureau is on that as well. Again, the Bureau doesn't have a lot going on. It's Podunkville. They're not having to track down. I imagine the biggest thing they might have is drugs being grown on a property here or there.
Or transported.
Yes. If you know anything about Brandon Swanson, please call the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at 877-996-6222. You can also email them at bca.coldcase@state.mn.us. Other than that, he just disappeared. You'd think that his baseball cap might show up.
Yeah.
If he fell in the water, his baseball cap, and they said, okay, so the fact that the phone didn't shut off instantly, for example, might mean it didn't go into the river when he fell into the river. And so it was on dry land, but then they would have found it.
Yeah.
The scent would have led to the phone, So but whatever happened, it was instantaneous because he never called back and he was never reachable. So if he fell into a hole, it was a deep hole, right?
Right.
But again, the dogs would have then tracked right to the edge of that hole. And they did follow along the river for a while. So he was walking near the river for a while. But just like he'd said, he could hear it. He couldn't see it.
I mean, it almost sounds like there has to be another person involved because otherwise...
Because he's completely removed.
Yeah.
But he wasn't on a road anymore.
UFO.
Right? I'm surprised nobody brought that up. I was going to bring that up. I was like, this is the perfect thing to be like, those Minnesota UFOs. But yeah, he's an absolute, just disappeared. And he had a good life. He was getting good grades. He was excited about the wind technology that he was getting certified in. And he had good friends. Somebody at one point sent in a tip that, he got in a fight that night with one of his friends or whatever. But that one came years later. And okay, so the friend followed him, found his car on a route that wasn't his normal route.
And followed him in the woods and did what?
Yeah, and then took him somewhere. Whatever they did didn't leave any blood. He didn't drop anything, including his keys during that fight.
And usually, especially in rural areas, people are kind of concerned for their neighbors.
That is exactly what the sheriff said when talking about the fact that some wouldn't let them on their property.
Well, I'm thinking, say he fell down an abandoned well.
Yes.
If you own that property, you know about that well.
Yes.
And you probably have it marked. You're not just leaving it. Like out here, we have mines. Mm-hmm. But that's
and some of them are unmarked.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different.
Well, and most people who have those don't know. Okay, I looked at a property not far from here. Well, we did when we were looking for this house. And it had on it just a warning, like when you're looking at the paperwork, a warning because there was a big hill behind it that used to be part of mining stuff. And it just said, could be mines that aren't found. So you have to be caught. It had to be on the paperwork to warn you. But there was no map. There was no marking because they did not know where the sealed mines were.
Okay.
So different situation. Yes.
Yeah, because usually a well, you've dug it. I mean, wells...
Right. If you're a farmer, a lot of them have been on the same properties, like
the
familial,
family, yeah.
Right? And so they know.
Yeah.
There's if you grew up on that farm, you would certainly know. I imagine that just like mines on your property, there would be something saying there is an old filled-in well, but I don't know that for sure. And
you wouldn't have to have that unless you were selling it.
Yes.
So...
either or you bought it and sold it. Yeah. So that's it's just, again, with the dogs, tracing him to a point, if he'd fallen into a well, the dogs would have gone to the edge of the well.
You would think.
So that's the thing is everybody who's talking about all the possible options are like, I don't know.
It could be. Well, and okay, so they said there were wild animals. Okay, so maybe an animal came out and chased him into the river.
Yeah.
But then what happened?
Right. I mean, then he's still in the river and his body still would have turned up.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, the hat would have come off.
That's what I kept... That's the thing that I come back to. His hoodie isn't going to fall off, but his hat, a baseball cap, that's going to fall off.
Especially if it's cold and he zipped the hoodie.
If you go in the water, a shoe would turn up.
Stuff fall out of your
happens
pockets.
all the time. They're barefoot when they're found because their shoes come off in the water. Mm-hmm. Stuff in his pockets, keys. He had on a silver chain around his neck, and there is a picture of him with it. It's loose. I imagine that would have come off. Yeah, he had his wallet. It was none of these things were left in the car. He had his glasses on. Those would have fallen off right away. I mean, you're in the water, your glasses are gone.
Yeah.
And somebody said they were silver, so they would have been reflective, so they probably could have found those. They would have been sent, anything that came off him would have been scented like him to be found on the bank. I don't know. They didn't say they searched with like metal detectors or anything like that for, say, keys. But again, keys are bright. That's one of those things that's more likely to turn up than, say, the wallet, although it might also be heavier, but you'd see it in the water reflective. Yeah. And they just did such extensive searches because they understood. They were like, listen, he could have walked any direction from that car.
Right.
And if he made it 3 miles this way with the dogs, then we figured out where he walked. But they made sure that they searched that distance in all directions, just in case.
They didn't just go one direction and not look anywhere else.
I think it was just, I lived in a little town called McMinnville. Well, I lived in, at that time, Sheridan, and I took a job in McMinnville. Same sort of situation, right? There was Amity. There were all these little towns around there. And there was one big highway, because it was the highway that headed out to the ocean. And it was 99 West, I think, for anybody who lives out there. And I would drive home then from one little city to another little city for a bit until I moved to McMinnville. And it's pitch black out there.
Oh, yeah.
So if you get even a little discombobulated, had I, say, tried to head to my grandma in Amity instead, I could see getting discombobulated on the roads. Because there were multiple ways to get there, but also multiple ways to go, oops, I took the wrong way. Because there's roads all over in a rural area like that. They're not marked, and there's no street lights, and the houses are dark.
And you're driving along, and maybe he's got the radio on. But haven't you ever done this? You're driving along, and you kind of space out?
No, there's actually a psychological term for that I can't remember, but you do.
And
on a familiar road.
I've done that here in Colorado Springs, and I've pulled up to a stoplight. I'm not so disconnected I'm not driving, but I've pulled up to a stoplight. But I've passed
where I might have turned to go somewhere unusual because I've gone my normal route.
Yeah, or I pull up to a stoplight and I look around and I go, why am I here?
Yeah.
I was going to the school, and this is how I get to the bookstore.
And they said he was driving back and forth because he had a part-time job back home at Hy-Vee.
Okay.
And so it was just a road he traveled all the time. So it totally would have been, and probably he took back routes sometimes. Like I did that all the time when driving to Beaverton, Portland, Salem from these little towns in Oregon, because there were back ways and I didn't want to deal with the heavier traffic if I went. So I knew those ways really well too.
Or some people really like driving. And really like driving at night. And that's when you do your best thinking. You're out driving these empty roads.
Certainly. So I can, he might have just been driving and then when he got broke down, everything looks the same if you're on a back road in the pitch black.
Why did he drive off the road in the first place?
Well, that's the thing. I was like, was that like alcohol, or was that just like, it was pitch black? Maybe he wasn't far off of the road. It was just his tires got onto that gravel. And the sheriff said at one point, like it just kind of looked like, somebody's car had broken down and they'd pulled off to the side. Like it was just right off to the side.
Or again, it could have been.
It just happened to be this ditch.
Animal jumps out in the road and
you go over. Yeah. Although you'd think he would have said, like, he was just like, I went off the road. But apparently he didn't have AAA. Boy, that's a problem but they wouldn't have found him. If you don't know where you are, they can't find you. Because originally he was like, I'm going to stick with a car and they're going to find me. And that was the safest thing to do. Once he went roaming off into woods and fields, it was done. And as they said, when they tracked it, it went past an abandoned farm. He didn't even pass a lived-in farm. That's how much property he was able to go over without running into a home that had people that he could ask for help. Because at some point you would probably do that when you were lost, go and knock on a farm door and just be like, God, I hope they don't shoot me with a shotgun.
Yep.
And so, it's just, he just disappeared into nowhere.
I hope their dog doesn't bite me.
Yes. I hope they don't have a guard dog on this property. That eats me. But, if he'd stuck to the highway.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah. It really is. That's the thing, though. That's why this one sticks out, is there's just nothing. Just nothing. And he was on the phone. They were on the phone for like an hour as he walked.
That totally eliminates, in my mind, any possibility that he was running away.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if you're
running
away,
they were like, no, it just doesn't make, you don't talk to your parents for an hour on the phone when you're trying to disappear yourself. That's just weird.
And you don't get mad because they can't find you.
Yes. You don't get frustrated. I mean, there's so many things pointing away from that. Because they were like, one of the other things, because I forget what it's called, but there is like a kind of a mental study process done when you can't find somebody and you then are going to go through all their life. And so one of the things was like, well, did he commit suicide? And they're like, no, you don't. This isn't how suicide works. You don't talk to somebody on a phone while you wander around in the woods.
And how did he do it?
And he, when things didn't work, he changed the plan to meet them a different way, right? They kept changing. Okay, well, I'll flash my lights. Okay, well, I'm going to meet you at this tavern. You don't do that if you're committing suicide.
No.
That's just documented how it works.
And the dogs would have found him.
Yes. They would have found him. And how would he have committed suicide then? He didn't have a gun. He didn't have a knife. He didn't, throw yourself in a river. But then your body turns up.
Yeah, and they said at points it was only 2 feet deep. And yes, I know you can drown in 2 feet of water fairly easily, but...
Yeah. But your body, it not weighted down.
Yeah.
With those shallow parts, they didn't say there were any like mysterious places where bodies disappear. You know, it wasn't like that. They very had a conviction that the body would have turned up. They said the way this river is with its turns, the body would have gotten stuck somewhere.
And it may well be that they've had a body or two.
Yes,
go into
they didn't
that
say
river.
that, but very possible.
Not on purpose, but
No.
yeah, that there'd been an accident, and they're like, well, here's where this one washed up.
Yeah,
so.
It's not like it's the Willamette or the Columbia that are so deep either. That's a pretty shallow-ish river if the deepest part is 15 feet.
Could have been cattle too. Cow falls.
Oh yeah.
Cows aren't enormously bright.
If you've got a lot of shallow areas, I mean, even with spring runoff, they were like, no, body would have been found.
That's just, what happened?
Yeah. Just
how terrible for his parents. Not that it's better to know that your child was murdered or...
No.
But
to just not know. And I'm sure, even though it was said, I'm sure there's guilt because they couldn't, that's not their fault because he was somewhere completely different than he said he was. And then the main route, they were on Highway 68. So
the only way it could possibly make sense, and it still doesn't, for him running away would be if he had an accomplice. If it was somebody and he set it up and called his parents while he was driving away.
Yeah. But an hour, why? Unless you really hated them. Everybody was like, no, his parents and him, they got along great. I think he was an only child. They never mentioned any siblings. So it wasn't...
Yeah, it would have to
be...
And
if your mom calls you back and apologizes for the frustration...
He would have to have been noticeably twisted and cruel to set his parents up in that.
Because there's when he was in 2 different cities, it would have been so much easier to just disappear from one of those cities and abandon your car.
Yep.
So, yeah, weird stuff. Poor his family.
There was a somewhat similar case in upstate New York, and I've been wanting to talk about it, but there's been a new development.
Oh.
Which is why I haven't.
Oh, yeah. And I think you've mentioned that you were waiting for...
Yeah. So what happened was it was a guy who was home for... Same age. Rural area. He was home for spring break. Doing well in college. Left a party. Went to a couple of parties with his friends. Left a party. And was walking home. And somebody had seen him walking home. And he was never seen again.
Mm-hmm.
And... nobody knew what happened to him. And then I can't remember how long ago it was this happened. I mean, it wasn't like 40 years ago. It was like in the same time frame. But it was a year ago. My sister was driving from one rural town to a slightly less rural town. And there was tons of state police and a coroner's van at an old farm. And somebody had made a phone call. And again, that's all I can say because I don't know who knew what, but somebody made a phone call to the police and said, you need to go to this farm and look in the well that's boarded over. What I've heard, what seems to be likely was that he got into a fight with somebody and the guy either accidentally or on purpose ran over him. And then the guy and his brother went to some grandparents' old farm, threw his body in the well, covered it up, and left.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, it seems like a really common thing in rural areas. Because I covered Terra Calico in New Mexico, and the area they were in, they were like, look on the farm, look in this, right? Look in this swimming hole. There's just... And then I covered a Native American family that disappeared way back, right? And then somebody called in a thing, and it's on this farm. And there's just so many things like that. The silo or whatever that the reporter that I did, they said they might be in there. With all that rural space, it's like, who calls these in, first of all? It's always anonymous.
Yes.
Look at this farm. It could be there.
And I mean, yeah. And sometimes it's a total wild goose chase. And sometimes it's somebody who knows something. I don't know. I don't care how good a friend you are. If you've accidentally killed someone, Here's a warning for you, Shannon. If you kill someone accidentally,
I'm probably not going to accidentally.
I was going to say, now, if you do it on purpose,
It'll
there's
be
a good reason
intentional.
for it, and I'm okay with that. But if it was an accident, for God's sake, tell their parents. Let their loved ones know what happened to them.
Well, the thing I don't get, it's always like every movie and book that does this too, right? And that's copied off of human nature. They're going to think I did it on purpose, so now I'm going to hide the body and make this whole situation so much worse than it already is because they're not going to believe this was an accident. And the chances are they will, but I'm sure there's like a slim chance that they're going to be like, you totally murdered them on purpose. So,
Especially when it's a stranger.
Right. Like I have no reason to kill this person. They're walking along a rural road at 2 a.m. and it was pitch black and I did not see them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just
so yes, I have
turn
just
yourself in for the accident. Yes. I mean, you might get in trouble for it, but it's going to be so much worse what you're doing to everybody. And if it does get found later on down the line.
And I've just confessed to the whole world that if you accidentally kill someone, I'm not going to cover it up for you.
But if it's intentional,
I'm like, let me get my shovel.
All right, we're good. Let's do this.
Well, that's just the kind of friend I am.
There's a meme. I don't remember if I've shared it yet. And it's just like, burying a body for you sounds like work. Let's do something else instead. I'll help you cover it up in all kinds of ways, but does it have to involve a shovel?
Do we have to bury it?
Can we throw it down a hole that already exists?
Is there a hog farm somewhere?
Yeah. All right, folks.
I'm sorry.
On that note,
if you weren't certain how twisted we are, well,
here you have it.
Yep, now you are.
Thank you for listening. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.